Thanks, Eliza. Thank you everybody for being here. I hope everybody had good holidays. We're back to the new year, so let's just get this started. My name is Kaliska. I'm one of the co-chairs. I will be facilitating the meeting today for the Portland Utility Board. So I'm just gonna go through our call to order. So under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing to the address listed. Pub. So for all of our meetings, we read our pub values, beliefs and values. So pub believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with pub. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. So putting our principles into actions, we speak up and speak out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, focus on the impacted individual or population, and condemn the conduct, not the person. Turn this over to Amy.
Hi, my name is Amy Archer-Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. When you are speaking, please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the hosts, the pub staff, Eliza and myself, so please limit any chats to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us if you've been waiting to speak and haven't been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. The co-host may lower your hand once you've begun speaking just to maintain the flow of the conversation. During the public comment period, the public may also raise your hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. The videos may be turned on for the board, presenters, and facilitators when speaking. If desired, it is not required. Members of the public and others should leave videos off. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If using your phone, please press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. Public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with Eliza or myself or raise your hand during the public comment period. It also will be available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. I'll pass it back to you, Kaliska, for the agenda.
Thanks, Amy. All right, so we have, as always, a pretty full agenda, but I think we have kind of dialed back so we can have time for discussions and questions. So we're gonna have just our regular, any disclosures of communications by any of this board or don't see any hands. All right. Did Amy or Eliza, we don't have anybody that signed up for public comment at this point, do we?
This is Amy. I've not received any requests yet.
I have not received a request either.
All right. I don't see any hands or anything in the chat at this point. Okay, so if anybody joins, I guess, and if we've missed it, then we can allow that later. Okay, so if there's no public comments, Eliza sent out the draft minutes back in December. Give a couple minutes for everybody. If there's any comments, questions, corrections. Okay, I don't see any hands, so the meeting minutes will stand as is. All right, so we are gonna have just sort of a budget session preview. Director Solmer, and it's a joint presentation between Water Bureau and BES, and Farshad and Ken, I think, will be joining Director Solmer. So I'm just going to turn the time over to them to talk about the budget cycle and let them cover that for the bureaus.
Thanks, Kaliska. I think this is Farshad Aladadi. I am the Business Services Group Manager with Water. I just want to make a quick correction to the presenters list. Angela Henderson, the Deputy Director for BES, and I will be presenting for BES. Ken is going to be in the background if we get some technical questions, but it'll be Angela and I for BES.
Okay, and I guess I should just make a note that Director Jordan unfortunately can't join us today, so this is why Farshad is stepping in. So thank you for taking his place and being present for us.
It's our pleasure. Okay,
sorry, this is Cecilia. Have I successfully shared the presentation?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, thank you.
Cecilia, however, good morning, or excuse me, afternoon, everyone. This is Angela Henderson with Environmental Services. Cecilia, it is currently not in slideshow mode. I don't know if that's what you intended, but if you would like to do that, I just wanted to call it to your attention. Perfect, thank you. So if it's okay with everyone, then we shall proceed, and let's advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. As you can see, the Bureau of Environmental Services has served the Portland area with a commitment to watershed health and public service. We've done so for a number of years, and our primary mission has been over the period of time to preserve and maintain the health of Portland's 5 watersheds, namely the Columbia Slough, Fano Creek, Johnson Creek, Tryon Creek, and Willamette watersheds. And so our mission is very simply to preserve and restore the health of Portland watersheds. And so this year and last year, as you can see, they have been a little different than prior years. And we have been in a period of growth, namely because of the COVID pandemic. But because of that, the COVID pandemic, and due to loss of revenues, the budget that we are working on currently is mostly a current service level budget with no new FTE, and will ultimately maintain fiscal sustainability through the pandemic. And our objectives include maintaining and enhancing existing service levels, as well as focusing on advancing our equity plan priorities. We will also continue to prioritize asset maintenance and reinvestment, and ensuring that we are continuing down a path of environmental leadership, as well as continuing to meet our regulatory obligations as required as a result of the number of regulatory permits that we operate under. Next slide, please. So I'm not sure if Gabe has joined our conversation today. But I'm happy to read the slide if desired.
I don't see Gabe. I believe she must be running late.
Oh, okay. So Cecilia, I'll defer to you. Would you prefer that I go ahead and read through the slide, or would you like to act in Gabe's stead?
Yeah, I can try to fill in. Sorry, I'm working off of multiple screens and it's having trouble unmuting myself at times. So bear with me. Portland Water Bureau, our mission and objective, of course, is to provide excellent water every minute of every day. Our objective is to prioritize public health, ensuring that we're meeting or exceeding regulatory standards. We work to maintain our system, certainly now and for our future generations. Increased seismic resiliency and improved infrastructure is something that we are consciously including in our planning efforts, and as we are investing in our infrastructure. Lastly, using resources wisely to ensure that we are maintaining affordable water service is also one of our objectives. As far as the regulatory requirement that drives both of our bureaus, we call this the alphabet soup. There are a lot of both federal and state regulations that we have to be complying with. These are, I think, the major ones, and certainly there are other ones that we have to be complying with. I'm not going to get into all of the details of this. Certainly, if you have questions about what any one of these are, we can talk about them as well.
Since I'm admitting people, this is Eliza, and I'll let everybody know Gabe has joined the room.
Yes, I'll turn it back over to Gabe.
Thank you so much. I apologize for being late trying to work out technology in an unfamiliar territory. So my apologies. And thank you so much, Cecilia, for keeping us going. So it looks like you were just on talking a little bit about all of the regulations that both bureaus operate under. That. Anything else you wanted to cover on that? Okay.
Well, welcome, Gabe. This is
Thank you.
Angela. I am acting, in case you weren't aware, I'm acting in Mike's stead. Both myself and Farshad will partner with you today for today's presentation. But I digress. So as you see here represented on this slide, this pie chart represents a high-level summary of the combined budget for both environmental services as well as water. And traditionally, we would provide this information separately for each bureau, but combine them for this presentation since the configuration of both bureaus is very similar. And as shown at the top of the slide for both bureaus, our combined budget is about $1 billion. And at the bottom, you'll see that the split between both BES and water are roughly $596 million and $417 million respectively. Debt service for both bureaus combined is a little over $233 million and largely represents capital investment we have made in the past. The capital improvement pie slice of $384 million, represents both bureaus' current capital investment that we intend to make this fiscal year. And a portion of the smaller slice of the pie is for rate stabilization transfers and reflects money that we are putting away for investment in future capital. In this particular presentation, it shows that capital investment is approximately 60% of both bureaus' budgets. And for BES, it's closer to 2/3 of our total budget. And as you can discern, the message here basically is that we are both bureaus rather, are both capital-driven operations. Next slide. So all of this capital investment is being done to make the system work long into the future. We have a combined asset value of a little over $30 billion, and the investments we make now impact how this slide will look going forward. It's a positive sign, however, that over 80% of our combined infrastructure is in the very good, good, and fair categories, as you'll see represented here. But we must also continue that investment to keep our infrastructure operating in those respective categories, while simultaneously working to move what is deemed to be the poor, very poor, and unknown ones over. And so we have about $2.8 billion for both bureaus combined in the poor and very poor categories. And those areas are a target for our asset management programs. The unknown category is solely BES assets and is a large concern for the Bureau that I want to emphasize. We have asset classes we are working through identification and condition assessment, and much of that is natural assets like drainage ways, stream corridors, and wetlands that are being identified or classified as to their health and ability to act as stormwater retention and conveyance facilities. The other parts of that are also pump stations and force mains, and mostly pump station and force mains, I might add. Our pipes are mostly gravity fed. And that means they are able to convey the material without the assistance of any force mains or pumps to help carry that material to our treatment plants. But we have over 40 miles of pipes that are pressurized, and we can't run a camera down those pipes like we can in the gravity system. And because of the corrosive nature of what we transport and the unknown condition of those pipes, we have some failures that we encounter from time to time and are working on better understanding those assets. Next slide. As we've shared, probably too much, one might think, we are infrastructure bureaus, right? And so you can see at the bottom of the slide that BES and water will spend a combined $2.1 billion over 5 years. That is a large amount of money, but we're looking at the amount of assets that the bureaus are maintaining. It is likely not enough, however, to keep the system at a sustainable level. And again, those very same, very good, good, and fair categories that I mentioned over the lifetime of those assets, while also trying to move the poor, very poor, and unknowns over as well, as I mentioned. And we will continue, therefore, to invest in ongoing system maintenance, as well as maintaining our regulatory compliance with, again, those number of permits, as indicated by the alphabet soup slide that Cecilia spoke to earlier, but also preparing our systems for seismic and climate resiliency, all the while maintaining equitable or providing for equitable economic recovery also through a number of means, not limited to both contracting and development opportunities. Next slide.
Angela, if I might just mention, this is Gabe Sommer with
Sure.
on that last piece that you mentioned. I think that's really important for PUB to understand that equitable economic recovery. It refers to both obviously the recovery that we're making and these huge investments that we're making in our system. Those are done by companies, some all over the world, but many local. And the way that we achieve these contracts can make a big difference in meeting the city's equitable contracting goals. So that's something that I know that the council is paying a lot of attention to as we spend these dollars to what companies they are going to, and that we're looking at that and being very intentional with how we award those contracts and how we process those contracts. So just wanted to add that piece to that. Thanks, Angela.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gabe. Very important clarification. Slide. Okay. With respect to our capital improvement program, this particular slide shows BES's capital investment over the next 5 years, but divided or split up by asset type, as you can see indicated by the different colors. You can see that the green portion of those bars is high over the next 2 to 3 years and then slowly tapers off there. And much of that is our secondary treatment expansion project that's out at our Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant, which is mandated by the EPA, so the Environmental Protection Agency. We will be spending a considerable amount of money on that project for the next few years, and then it will begin to fade. The blue section of the bar reflects pipe replacement projects, and the average age of our pipes is 80 years old, and there are some downtown in the downtown corridor that are upwards of 120 years old that are currently being replaced as well. And as the treatment plant STEP project, as we refer to it as, again, referring to the secondary treatment expansion project that's ongoing at the treatment plant, as that project goes down in the next few years, the blue section that you see represented in these bars will get bigger and will be pretty stable, as we always will have to, continually, if you will, replace pipe as they age, etc. And the other section of note that I would like to call to you all's attention is the black bar, which is the restoration and remediation. It is very difficult for us to predict that bar in out years. And we are now in remedial design for the Portland Harbor site as well. And as we come out of remedial design, we will start to work on remediation. We know that remediation will be a large number. However, we don't yet know what the city's share of that obligation will be, however. So this could look very differently going forward. Next slide.
And I think that one is for water. So just wanted to go through the same information. You can see a lot of the same kinds of things that BES Angela just talked about for BES. For water, you can see $1.2 billion in our capital program over the next 5 years. And just some information on our major projects. You can see in the blue, that is our treatment program. So that includes filtration. So you can see that those are bigger bars over the next few years in order to pay for that program. The next, probably biggest one, is that green section. That's our transmission and terminal storage program. And that would include our pipeline that will connect the filtration to our system. So you can see those larger in the next few years to pay for that Bull Run treatment program. And then I'll also highlight in orange, down at the bottom, you can see the distribution program. A major component of that is the Willamette River crossing, and as well as ongoing core asset replacements. So things like mains and hydrants and meters and valves, things that we do as a core part of our capital program. But the reason that it is large in the next few years is really due to that Willamette River crossing program, which we have talked with Pub before. And then it's small, but I also just wanted to highlight in customer service, the advanced meter infrastructure program. And you'll see that in both bureaus' capital programs. It's about a $90 million project to bring advanced meter infrastructure that will support and give additional analytics to both bureaus. And we can move to the next slide. So before we kind of dive into the mechanics of the rate ordinance, I just wanted to review with you how our money is invested. So this is really a slide that we developed for customers. I think it's also really helpful for us all to understand this. And this is an area where I think we regularly hear confusion, and I think we've all done it, but we've referred to, your bill as your water bill. And as you can see here, we actually have the utility bill actually goes into a number of different areas. So you can see the largest portion is to support the sewer system. As you heard Angela talk about the capital needs there, you can see why that is the bigger portion of the bill. You can also see our water system and our stormwater system, as well as that gray section, the Portland Harbor Superfund, as Angela just mentioned, as well as the base charge to provide all of the customer service that that the Water Bureau provides for both bureaus. Next slide. So because we understand that bill can be daunting for certain segments of the population, we wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the affordability pieces that both bureaus contribute to focus on affordability, since that is one of the priorities that both bureaus share, as well as our commissioner and the the full council. We have talked about a lot of these, so I know that PUB is familiar with these programs, but our low income assistance at both a tier 1 and tier 2 level, those are bill discounts. As we've talked about, those are available to single family residential customers. We also have crisis assistance that has definitely been, there's been an uptick in crisis assistance during the pandemic, as well as in the utility safety net program. We also have assistance for leak repair. When people do have leaks, we have a program that assists that. And then for everyone, we've got I would say a very flexible payment arrangement program. And during the pandemic, we have temporarily waived eligibility requirements for that. We wanted to make sure that people can get onto payment arrangements when their income may not be as predictable as it was in the past. We also offer emergency rent assistance. That's our program with Home Forward that assists people who are living in multifamily. And then through BES, if you are able to make changes to your impervious surface and connections there, then there are Clean River rewards available that would also provide additional assistance for the bill. And go to the next slide. And Angela, I think I'm turning this one back over to you.
Actually, Angela's tapping me out, and
Okay.
I'm gonna come in. Hi everyone, Farshad Aladadi, BES Business Services Group Manager, and everything we've been talking about so far does ultimately translate into the bill. And on the left side of is the current bill, and the right is the projected bill for next year. You'll see in a latter slide that the rate of increase for both bureaus combined is expected to be around 4.85%. This slide also shows, as Gabe mentioned, the 2 tiers for our low income programs. The middle bar is the tier 1 discount for those at or below 60% of the mean family income, MFI, at roughly half of the typical single family residential rate. The right bar is the tier 2 discount for those that are at or below 30% of MFI, and is about 21% of the single family residential rate. As Gabe mentioned in a previous slide, we have other low income programs, but these are the 2 significant ones that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on. Next slide. Okay. This slide provides a general idea of where Portland fits in when compared to our national and regional sister utilities that are similar. The ones above Portland, and you see us in the middle there, and there are some below that are generally national comparators. And these are cities that have CSOs with similar size populations and demographics. We also include some local cities for comparison to provide a sense of the bill. As you can see, we are in the middle and will likely stay in the middle. And the reason for that is major capital investments like the CSO. We have completed our CSO. We've talked about that. Many of national CSO cities are only beginning their CSO projects, and that's driving their rates up faster on the sewer and stormwater side. However, many of those same cities already have filtration as part of their service levels, and we don't. And so we're making those investments now. And we think those 2 different capital investments will offset and keep us generally in the middle of this pack. Next slide.
Thanks, Farshad. I think that's a really good overview of that. And I agree that we're seeing cities that have not made their investment either in sewer or stormwater. I come from, thank you so much, Eliza. Yes, combined sewer overflow is the acronym for CSO. But I come from San Diego, and San Diego has long deferred its investment in stormwater. They're facing, I just heard their new figure is upwards of $5.7 billion in deferred infrastructure for their stormwater. So you can see that because of the investments that BES has made in recent years, we are far ahead of that curve. And because of the investments we're making now on the water side, we are not as far ahead of other cities and jurisdictions. So I do think that that prediction of us staying roughly in the middle as other cities make those improvements is well founded. What I wanted to share here is I think this group has seen this document or this question from a survey that we did as part of the Bull Run treatment projects, but I just thought it was useful to share in terms of what we're finding with our analytics. And this was a survey that was done in both 2019 and 2021. You can see the blue bar on the top for each answer to this question, and then the green bar from 2019. So we asked the question about how residents and those we surveyed found the drinking water portion. So I just went through the utility bill, and you can see that drinking water portion. We asked them to think about that and answer, did they think it was reasonable, high, but they could still afford it, or high and they struggle to afford it. So you can see this, and it may not be particularly intuitive. 2019, of course, was before the pandemic, and then 2021 was sort of in the midst of the pandemic. And you can see that we have about a third in both years of respondents that found the drinking water portion of their utility bill to be reasonable and that they could afford it. About 40 to 44% who felt that it was high, but that they could afford it. And then I think the most interesting portion is the group that said that they find the drinking water portion high and they struggle to afford it. It's actually a number that's come down from 2019 to 2021. These of course are just snapshots in time, and they can change. That's why we do the survey over again. But you can see just 13% are saying that they struggle to afford it. So we know that the bill can be daunting to some folks, and it is really our position that we need to make sure that we are providing targeted levels of support so that we're not just making the bill lower across the board. That's not going to support the people who struggle to afford it. And for those who can afford it, it's not going to make an appreciable difference. We really want to hone and target the assistance that we give to those who need it. Next slide. So I'll just continue here, and I believe that Eliza and Amy have provided this, but just as a quick reminder, we both bureaus get budget guidance from both our commissioner and from the mayor. And so you can see sort of the key elements from both of those budget guidance documents. On the mayor's side, we were directed to stay within our rate forecast for both bureaus and to prioritize rate stability and predictability. So sort of that smoothing, no jumps, no big spikes or cuts, but have that sort of smooth stability. As I was just talking about, really focusing on that targeted outreach to make sure that the folks who are in need of our financial assistance programs get that information and are able to easily apply and receive that financial assistance. And then a reminder in the mayor's budget guidance about the council priorities, which are community safety, houselessness, livability, and shared economic recovery. And I will hope that you will see those priorities, how they have aligned in the budgets that both bureaus have provided. You can see just a little additional information from Commissioner Mapp's budget guidance, really in line with what the mayor suggested, and a focus on the bureaus continuing to be efficient, effective, and equitable. And again, as you heard from Angela, the aging infrastructure for both bureau, making sure that we are addressing that. Next slide. And then in terms of the budget priorities, so obviously that guidance is fairly general, fairly high level. Both bureaus have also committed to a focus in their budgets on customer service, on affordability, as we've talked about, and climate action. And then, I just like to clarify that, of course, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So while all of these things are important, the bureaus have focused in several different directions to make sure that we are focusing on what we think will prove most productive and useful to the bureaus and to our customers. For the Water Bureau, that is implementing our strategic and our equity plans, which have a lot of these areas embedded in them. So we think by implementing those, we will be able to achieve those budget priorities. And for BES, a focus on regulatory compliance, condition assessment, as you've heard, and echoing the council's focus on the homelessness crisis. And Farshada, am I handing this one back?
Yep.
Great.
Thanks, Gabe. We've heard a lot about rates, and I think we wanted to show you a little snapshot of both the history of our individual and combined rates and where we see them heading in the years to come. The blue bar is the water, and the green bar is the BES annual rate increase. The black bar in the middle is the combined rate of increase. If you extended this bill out to the left, you would see that BES was even higher than the 5.35 represented on this chart. In the early 2000s, at the peak of our combined sewer overflow work, the CSO project, we had annual rate increases of upwards of 7 to 8%. You can see how post-CSO, we have been able to reduce our rates of increase to a predictable and sustainable level that's right around 3% currently. Water, on the other hand, is just entering its major capital work and is working to make those rates of increase stable and predictable. And as they complete their major project, you'll see their rates come down to a more sustainable level, just as BES's experience was post-CSO. Next slide. So there are a number of things that we've been tracking as part of our budget preparation, and we're characterizing these, I think, as positive effects and headwinds. And any one of these can impact the previous graph and move our rates up or down. I'll just call out a few important notes. The COVID impacts that we were anticipating were not as severe as our initial projections were. But with this next wave of COVID, with the Omicron variant, we are trying to be responsible and measured. And even though our revenues are coming back online a little ahead of where we thought they were, we don't think we're completely out of the woods yet in terms of the revenue impacts from COVID. Interest rates continue to be at a historic low, and both bureaus will be taking advantage of this and searching for refunding opportunities as they arise for our debt. BES's renewable natural gas RNG project revenues were estimated fairly conservatively. And now, based on market trends, we have a better sense of what actual revenues may be when the project is up and running. And we think that they may be higher than anticipated. So these are all potential positives that we're keeping an eye out for. Headwinds, on the other hand, are real risks to our finances and our budget. Inflationary pressures on both operating and infrastructure investments are very much real, and that could have an impact on our buying power for our budget. The Portland Harbor remediation will have an impact. We just don't know what that will be until the the liability is distributed in the next year or two. That's that analysis is underway right now. The bureaus are seeking ways to reach low-income multifamily customers. Those types of programs and any expansion of our existing programs will put upward pressure on rates. And a couple times we've heard about AMI, automated meter infrastructure. This is a really important investment in our metering infrastructure, which both bureaus rely on. And that is going to be coming online in the next couple of years. Next slide. And we wanted to call out specifically get into more details about our equity work in both bureaus. It's been mentioned in previous slides at a high level, but we would like to just take a kind of a more deeper dive into some of the work that's underway currently. So these are some of our focus areas in equity. You'll see how diverse they are. And we've called out where applicable, which bureaus they are occurring in, and if it's not called out, it's a shared focus area. So affordable water and wastewater services, making sure that our rates are stable and predictable, and it's a good value for our customers. Scaling up asset management and condition assessments. This addresses systems risk and equitable system delivery. Contracting and procurement, making sure that we have equitable contracting opportunities for Native and tribal-owned businesses, using innovative contracting tools like CBAs in our STEP program, being active in the co-bid utilization, procurement forecasts, and proactive outreach for upcoming contract opportunities. So making sure we're giving heads up to firms to make sure they know of opportunities that are coming and have time to apply. Workforce and professional development. Clearly, this is a very important component of how we do our work. Career pipelines and creating on-ramps into advancement. Really managing and expanding inclusive hiring practices and requirements, and enhancing training and professional development opportunities. And for our communities, making sure that our work really reflects our mission of supporting a more resilient and action-oriented stance on climate change. We are also focused on enhancing our community partnerships, outreach, and engagement. Portland Harbor is a major body of work that's underway, and there are many outreach opportunities and grants associated with that work. We have been partnering with and supporting tribal governments and urban Native peoples as it relates to water and BES missions. We have been deeply engaged in houseless response on a number of levels. Community Equity Index, this is a really interesting quantitative approach where we're trying to really use this concept of a triple bottom line to help prioritize planning for operating and capital deployment and investments. Communicating demographics and interconnected vulnerabilities using geospatial tools and mapping, and having a more informed decision-making process that supports transparency in our policy setting. We are interested in meaningful language and disability access in support of Titles 2 and 6. Accessible emergency communications and language access guidance and ADA transition plan implementation is a priority for us. In BES, we're exploring a concept called I for Equity, which is a restorative justice approach to healing, reconciliation, and rebuilding trust within our bureau, between work groups, between management and employees, and between the bureau and the community. And we also have plans to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion at the Water Bureau, as indicated in terms of the strategic interests that Gabe mentioned in a previous slide. So for environmental services, our internal budget process in the next 12 months, we'll be recentering and using a portfolio management approach to assess our existing budget. We'll be looking at ways to reprogram with our existing resources so that we have better alignment of program and budgets to meet future and current and future operational and regulatory needs. We'll be identifying areas where efficiencies can be realized, and we'll address areas of underspending and reprogram those resources to meet current needs. Loss of revenue from pandemic has forced the Bureau to look at existing vacancies throughout the Bureau, and we'll be taking a deeper look at how to how best to fill those vacancies over the next 12 months.
Thanks, Farshad. And so I'll just talk a little bit about the budget process on the water side. In a lot of ways, we have done what Farshad was just talking about to get us to this point in the budget. And you'll see this a lot with both water and BES. We try something, if it works, we share that, we coordinate so that both bureaus can take advantage of kind of that learning laboratory. So in our case for water, what we've done is really identified our resource needs in preparing for this budget and put those needs and those requests from all over the Bureau into 4 priority buckets, and then tried to really understand how we can fund those requests. So either it was something that we added to the budget that we could achieve within our existing rate structure, or it needed to be, as Farshad was just talking about, reallocated from the existing budget. So is this a higher priority than something else that we are currently doing? On the people side of things, we have used, I think very effectively, a musical chairs sort of approach, which really for us means that if there's something that is a higher priority, do we have someone in the Bureau who is capable of taking that on? And then is there somebody else who can take on that job that that person one is leaving to do this higher priority issue, or is it something that we can let go for the time being? And then the other last option on these fund requests was really, is this something that is a priority for us, but can we delay? Is it something that must be done now? And to make those decisions, what we focused on were really the risks of the forecast. So those headwinds that Farshad was talking about, what are those risks? Do we have the capacity to do this work right now? It may be very important work, but if we are not set up to do that, we don't want to take on those expenses, hire those positions if we don't feel that we have the capacity to do that. And then one item that I know we've talked about, and Cecilia has talked about to Pub before, is really this demand gap. So this is a national trend, and certainly the Water Bureau is no exception. Demands were forecasted over the last probably even 20 years to be much higher than they have turned out to be. For most of us, that is a good thing. That means that we are being far more efficient with our water use. We have more efficient appliances. We are more conservative and conservation minded with our water use. But that does mean that we have a higher demand in our plan than is actually being used by our customers. And so we do need to close that gap. So that was another piece. And as that gap gets smaller and smaller, we are better able to utilize all of our budget. We also wanted to make sure in our budget process that we're maintaining flexibility. All of those unknowns that Farshad talked about are absolutely applied to the Water Bureau, and we wanted to make sure that we were keeping maximum flexibility while still doing the things that we know are being asked of us. So of course, just balancing that risk with the needs and making sure that we are adhering to the Mayor and Commissioner Maps's guidance by staying within our current forecast. All right, so I just wanted to end with some next steps to orient all of us to what is ahead of us in the next few months. You know from Amy's review that I believe your last meeting, January 26th is the date for the bureaus to submit to the city budget office their 5-year, both bureaus, their 5-year preliminary financial plan, the 5-year capital plan, the requested budget for both bureaus, and then PUB's initial budget letter will accompany that submission. So that's January 26th, which feels very soon. And then next month in February, PUB will continue to do its budget review. And I think you have discussed the top prioritized program offers for that. And I know there'll be more discussion there. Just a little forecast. The CBO, City Budget Office, will do its review and analysis of both bureaus' budgets. So that will be available to PUB as well in February. In March is when the council begins its budget work sessions, and there is a opportunity for PUB to present as part of that on the budget work sessions. April, the mayor's proposed budget will come out, and everyone will have a chance to review that and see how it differs or doesn't differ from what has been requested. And then in May is when the actual rates, the rate hearing and the rates are set by council, and there is another opportunity for PUB to present as part of that. I believe that's it. So if we have time, I'll look to Eliza and Amy to see if there are any questions that any of the bureau staff can answer. And I think Cecilia, you can pull the slides down.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It was great. We do have time for questions. I do just kind of want to note before we get in there that we will have more time to have budget discussions as we go through sort of the budget season. And this is sort of just the beginning, so don't think we have to ask all the questions at this meeting. But so if you guys do have one specific to the presentation, we have time to take all of those. We've allotted a good portion for discussion. So I guess Karen Williams.
Thanks, Kaliska. I'd like to go back to the numbers that were shared at the beginning of the presentation about a couple $2.1 billion set aside for I think maintenance and capital improvement, but not new things, but taking care of existing things. As I believe that's what that $2.1 billion was. And that's in comparison to $30 billion in assets, more or less. So I think I heard in that portion of the presentation a question on, is that enough? And especially in light of, one of our priorities being building resiliency and looking ahead to the effects of climate change. So is there, I guess, is there an industry standard? What kinds of percentages are other cities putting towards their maintenance and fixing infrastructure as opposed to their investments in newer infrastructure? Is there an industry standard there? And are we setting aside enough? I think those are my two questions.
I guess I would ask Farshad or Cecilia, do you want to talk a little bit about what we see in the industry in terms of
Sure.
capital programs?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Gabe. And I think that's a really important question. I appreciate it being asked. I think it's a difficult question to answer. I think from the BES perspective, the industry standard is really tricky. You may have heard this in in different contexts or in different presentations, but a lot of the water infrastructure is kind of the same vintage. So it's all aging and failing at the same time. So the history on what the right level of investment to have sustained service levels, I think is an open question. What we do know is that we have a very old infrastructure and it is starting to fail, and repairing failing infrastructure is much more expensive than maintaining and replacing infrastructure before it fails. And I think when we talk about concepts like sustainability, it's not to say that investment is made and then we just kind of wipe our hands of it for 100 years. It's what is the constant annual level of maintenance and replacement that is needed so that we can avoid large scale failures. And the short answer is I don't think there is a specific industry standard percentage that some percentage of your overall asset valuation needs to be replaced. I think there are examples in general asset management, but in terms of water and wastewater utilities, I'm not sure that there's a set standard, but I think it's safe to say that we're behind the curve, and we need to make kind of a bubble investment over the coming decades to remediate a lot of our risk of asset failure, and then we need to keep that investment level at a steady state so that we avoid catastrophic failures that could be really costly to address.
Cecilia, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add that certainly there are no two systems are alike. Not only are we talking about the aging of the system being different across the country, but just the condition of the soil is very different that could influence the life of the pipes in the ground. I would also add that that's the programs that we have in both bureaus on asset management is really a key to understanding the capital investment that we need to be making on our system. And that is definitely something that feeds into our capital planning work.
Right. So I'll just add, we have really state-of-the-art, asset management plans for all of our major assets. And that is what gives us the best information as to what kind of investments are needed over what length of time. And then, of course, that's balanced against all of the other needs of the Bureau, including affordability. So it's not that we can always take our asset management plan and it comes up with a number and then we just plug in that number. It's always looked at through the lens of what else is going on in both bureaus.
Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I actually have several questions, but I'll just ask one at a time. Wait for another turn. You, in the discussion, both of you mentioned the advanced meter project, and it was shown at $90 million. The last I remember hearing about that project was that, and I think it was in this year's budget, there was $50,000 to look at the feasibility or practicality of going with an advanced meter system. And it from the way a couple of you have referred to it, it sounds like you've made that decision. Am I correct that you've made that decision that you want to pursue the $90 million? And then also, I wonder if that might be one of the items that might be under the category of delay. It doesn't seem like it's a to me, it doesn't seem like it's an imperative that because we haven't had it for 100 years. So going to it, I really wonder about the value of having in that $90 million in the budget when we've got so many other things that are going on, especially with Water Bureau and the expenses for the filtration plant and that type of thing. So that's my question. Have you made a decision about the advanced metering, and what can you tell us about that, the need for it?
this is Eliza, and I wanted to chime in briefly before I think Cecilia or Gabe speak, just to let everybody know that there had been a request for information on the meter project, and Jamie Cuddy and Marcy Reese are working to put that together. And so we will actually have a fact sheet directly from the folks in charge of that. I think Marcy, I have to check my email, but Marcy thought end of January, she'd have that together and out to you all. And now just, I wanted to let everybody know that.
Yeah, and for, this is Cecilia, and for planning, both bureaus are in the next update or in the current update of the capital program, incorporating that project in our capital plan over the next 5 years to move forward with that project.
Part of my question was, I thought that this year you were spending money, you had a budget item for doing the evaluation. So am I correct in assuming that what you've just said means that you have information back from that preliminary study that both bureaus are saying, yes, this is what we need to do?
Yes, we have done a feasibility study, looked into the various option of automated meter infrastructure. And the consultant had come back with a recommendation to us as far as what is the best option for the Bureau to consider. And based on that report, that information is looking to cost about $90 million between both bureaus. And so our plan is to incorporate that into the 5-year capital plan, 45 million in each of the bureaus capital plan. And the goal is to include that in the budget for submission to council to approve to move that project forward.
I don't want you to try and answer this now, but this is related to this, is that, and I guess Eliza mentioned it, that somebody's putting together information for us so that we can understand how this is a priority and how it is, as you just said, within the 5-year plan. And it's not an item that would be under the category of what you had as you termed delay in those 4 or 5 categories.
That's correct. Yeah. And yes, so we are working on putting together information about the project, the benefits that the project will be providing to the Bureau and to our customers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Kale.
Yes, thank you. I actually have several questions too, and I want to thank Tom for bringing that up, because 90 million bucks, over the next 5 years, during a time where we're expecting all these other prices to kind of add up and drive up, I think is it was something that we have to, or we should be addressing. And what I wanted to ask also, this wasn't my original question, but if you can include in that report, where we'll start receiving some return, on that investment. At which point we'll start receiving a return on that investment, where the people, Portlanders will start when that project takes effect. My question really is, you mentioned we are investing with low-income assistance program, crisis assistance, and these programs to help folks get by. Do we have a comparison as far as the amount of money that has been used towards helping folks, and the amount that has been used in the previous 2 years, so we can kind of take a look at how much has been put there, if there's been added investments? Because before I came on, I saw I noted that was one of the priorities, and so I just wanted to kind of get some follow-up of, if it was a priority, how much money have we invested into it? Also, with workforce, developments and all that. I also want to kind of see what are the financial investment, what have been the resources that have been contributed to actually make that happen. I hear a lot of talk and about diversifying and helping folks, folks of color kind of move up and develop into positions. I assume things like this also require money. So, how much money have we invested in that, if there has been, and what type of resources have we started, and is there any type of information that has give us a comparison of what we did in the past and what's it going to look like now, and possibly how much are we willing to invest in the future. So everything's going to be added on and compounded as far as the budget goes. But for me, I'd like to see us invest dollars into those things that are has to do with equity. And I'm sorry, these are a lot of questions. I'll probably repeat them again. But there was also that portion that was talking about enhancing community partners outreach, and how much money has been allocated. Has there been an increase, by percentage? How did we do in the past? How are we now? How are we, how much are we plan on investing in? So kind of same with investments with the workforce. Same thing. We say we are going to be doing these things to help folks out. What's the actual picture look like?
This is Gabe Salmer. I'm happy to start answering those. I guess I'll just check in. Kaliska, would you like us to answer each question, or do you want us to note those and get written responses back? What's the best use of your time?
I'm thinking, unless you guys can answer them directly, it sounds like some of those might need a little bit of research to them.
Yes.
So Kale, if you don't
Yeah, I wasn't
mind.
expecting an answer
Okay.
right now, because those have to do with dollars spent and kind of seeing. I don't expect you to know off the top of your head or have it right in front of you. So, a written response would be helpful. But if you can answer the ones that you can, that'd be helpful.
Okay, so I don't know, Gabe, if there's ones that you can answer just like a quick. If not, then I think maybe Kale, I don't know if you want to submit those questions to Eliza and Amy, and then they can make sure that those get transferred to the staff, and then those responses get sent back to us. But
yeah, that's probably best. I know we've been taking some notes too, and we'll confer with Amy and Eliza to make sure that we get those questions, and then we can get you more specific answers in writing.
okay. Yeah, so I think Kale, just in the interest of time and just wanting to get you accurate information, it's probably best if we take those from you in a written form and respond back.
I can do that. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the questions, though. And then Robin.
Yeah, thank you. Probably another one of those questions that you have to write down and get back to us about, but it's kind of a two-parter, which is directly related to financial assistance program for low income. How much did it cost the current financial system program specifically for single family residences? Like the enacting of that originally, what was that? What was the increase to ratepayers when we first came out with that? And then what are the estimates for the cost of providing that same financial aid to the apartment renters who are currently under like a different system? Because right now, just within the briefing, it was mentioned that offering financial assistance to the multifamily residents or apartment complexes would be looking at like an upward pressure on rates. And so I just wanted to get a clearer picture of like we successfully increased our rates previously to bring the financial system to where it is currently. What were those rate increases to what we've had correspond? And then what are the estimations of expanding that to low income apartment renters, because I feel like we definitely need to get that on at least the 10-year plan.
Thanks, Robin. We can definitely, thank you for those really specific questions. We can definitely get written responses on those. Just because the topic has come up, one thing that might be helpful as just background is that our current low-income program, the Tier 1 and Tier 2 program that are for our single-family customers, that's foregone revenue. And I will tell you, it took me a long time to kind of get my arms around this, and our financial folks are much more adept at this. But foregone revenue means that we assume that we will not get in as much revenue. So people who would have paid more like the typical bill are not paying as much of that. So we get less revenue in, which means on a very basic scale, without all the nuance that I know exists, that we have to ultimately charge more or provide fewer services in order to make up that difference. So in this case, it's not for the single family side, it's not money that we pay out, it's money that is not coming in that would otherwise have come in. That's a little bit different than the current low-income program for the contract that we have with Home Forward to provide emergency rent assistance, which is sort of the equivalent. Because we can't give a bill discount to someone who doesn't get a bill, we contract with Home Forward. We can give you those numbers because we know exactly how much we've paid out to Home Forward on that account. That's our existing low-income program for multifamily. What we've also talked about is how can we know that that's not meeting all of the need that exists in multifamily. So how can we provide additional support to multifamily? And I think that's what Farshad was referencing when he said that would continue to put more pressure on rates if we increased our contribution there, whether it was for foregone revenue or whether we actually contracted to have more additional support. So happy to get you that number. I know that didn't include any numbers, and so I'm happy to give you the numbers where we have them. Just wanted to provide everyone with that background on the foregone revenue piece of it.
Thanks, Gabe. And I think Robin, yeah, those ones, if you can provide those to Eliza and Amy, I'm sure they'll respond to those with the information you requested. So Karen Spencer.
Thank you for the presentation. Some of my questions have already been asked, and I have a couple that I wanted to ask in addition. One of the numbers on the folks who were struggling to pay their bill, there was a significant drop from, I believe, 19% to 13%. And I am very curious if there's any hypothesis about that drop. Has basically everybody moved to better or cheaper accommodations and now they're finding it more affordable, or if something else is the hypothesis there. My other question relates to the inflationary pressures. I have not lived through a period of dramatic inflation, and so I am wondering if there, as my understanding is that things are going to get more expensive. So if we think that they're going to get more expensive, are there outlays or projects that should be advanced forward that ought to be considered, or things postponed if we think there's going to be other changes? And then the final question that I have is on the advanced metering. I know that it's not the topic, but I just wanted to point this out when we get to that. The question that I had was whether advanced metering would decrease head count needs or simply shift the number of head count that are needed to somewhere else to focus on servicing that metering. And those are my three areas. Whatever you care to answer now, great. If not, I can wait for later responses.
Well, happy to answer those in more detail in writing, but I can tell you just quickly now to your first question about what is causing that drop. I don't have a definitive answer, and why 2019 we would have had 19% and then 2021 we would have had 13% saying that they're struggling with that. It's surprising to me, given that we're living through a pandemic and the additional financial pressures that would place on people. My two pet theories, and they're just what I look at when I look at that data. One is that we may have people who adjusted their water use, and so they're actually using less water, and so their bills have gone down, and so they are now at a place where they don't find those as high. So they've made some behavioral changes. I don't know that would account for that big of a drop. So my other theory is that there were a lot of expenses. And so we may have people who were in that category who struggled to afford not only the drinking water portion of their utility bill, but probably their gas, their rent, their, many other things. And they may have moved out of the area or moved in with family, something else. So they are either out of our system completely because of other financial pressures, or they have made big life adjustments. And so this is just, they're just out of the pool of respondents. So that's my short answer on that one. And happy to get you written responses on the other ones.
Thank you.
Sorry, unless BES would like to respond on any of those.
Thanks, Gabe. And Karen, thank you for the questions. We will definitely get you more details, but I just some anecdotal information on inflation, things that you've probably seen in the media that has been coming home for significant impacts with BES, particularly on capital projects. The cost of raw materials has increased greatly. Steel, wood, we've heard the news on those items, and that's the materials that we use to do this capital work. And so the cost of delivering the capital project and the services is becoming more expensive beyond our contingencies, and that's how we adjust that. I think reprioritizing projects, as you suggested, is one option. Another option is to potentially re-engineer these projects so that the materials used are different. And that typically means that we're delivering a lower level of service than initially desired. But those are all things that we are struggling to balance on the materials cost side. And then I think just recently there's been a lot of discussion about the labor market and the shortage of employees and how that's putting upward pressure on wages. I think that's something on an operational level that all businesses, including bureaus, including our bureaus, are looking to need to account for in the future. If the cost, the labor costs increase, then that does put pressure on our ability to deliver the services that we've committed to. But again, more information we can provide soon.
Thank you.
And in the interest of time, I think, Amy, you'll be our last question, but if anybody else has any questions, or feel free to send an email to Amy and Eliza, and we can get those answers and they can get sent off to the Bureau.
Great. Thanks, Kaliska. First, thanks to both bureaus for this very thorough and interesting presentation. I really appreciated it. I have basically a timing question related to the automated metering infrastructure. So I believe the pub has a draft letter due at the end of January. If pub wants to make a comment in the letter about the metering, is that how will that work if we're going to get information, get the fact sheet at the end of January as well?
The initial
still have enough time.
Amy Chomowicz, the initial budget letter is actually sort of a forward-looking document, and so it sort of says these are the values we're going to be applying, because there hasn't been enough time for you to dig into the program offers and all that, and so the contentful letter comes later.
Great. All right. Thank you.
All right. So I just want to thank again the bureaus for their participation. That presentation was fantastic. And I think Amy, if you wanted to step in really quick, Amy Archer, Master, sorry, not Amy Chemwitz.
Yes,
Chance
I
to
will
update.
step in and get started on the next steps. Amy actually kind of started a little bit of that as we kind of get started on some of the next steps in talking some about what we'll do next as far as diving into some of the details of the budget documents that you'll be seeing from the bureaus. And the development of the budget letter, which are kind of the next two phases of the budget process for you all. So, so you saw the program offer information that I sent out, and I heard back from quite a few of you. So thank you to those of you who responded. I heard back from 9 of you, so that was great. I will quickly run through for the areas where there was some kind of common alignment of potential priority areas for each of the bureaus. I've just highlighted those areas where there seem to be kind of majority votes for the program offer areas for each of the bureaus. There were 6 program areas in Water Bureau and 3 program areas in BES that received at least 5 votes for priority program offer areas. And otherwise they were kind of dispersed a little bit among other offer areas. And then I've also kind of highlighted some of the comments that some of you made. And I can provide that, all of that detail to each of you if you want to kind of dive deeper into it with discussion or have more discussion at a future meeting. It kind of depends on how deep we want to dive into that. I put on here just a question or suggestion from one of the pub members who had flagged as they were kind of reviewing the priority areas for the bureaus. And I don't think we need to answer this question right now, but I'm just kind of putting it here at the beginning of this conversation just as a thought, because it did kind of resonate as I saw your responses, that there did seem to be more priorities were highlighted in Water Bureau than in BES, and not because of budget areas or certainly the size of the budget and the program offer areas are both substantial and of great interest to all of the members, but at least the one member had identified that they felt that there were more significant changes anticipated, or there's more discussion recently about some of the areas. And so they felt that there were more priorities that they wanted to spend a little bit more time on in upcoming meetings. And so if other pub members felt similarly, then they were hoping that maybe others would consider proportionately kind of dividing the time in upcoming meetings if more priorities ended up in one bureau over the other. So I just wanted to put that on the table for your consideration as well. So as we look at where it shook out, these were the 3 program areas that received the most votes for prioritization, which included the strategy program offer area, treatment, operations and maintenance, and business support. The bulleted notes on the side, those are just the individual notes that that a few of the pub members had highlighted, kind of flagging some of the notes on the reasons why they chose those areas. Many folks submitted their priorities without any comments. So a lot of the votes were submitted without any individual comments. So don't necessarily take them to be the only reasons that people prioritize these areas, but I did want to provide those, and I will provide those to the bureaus as well, just for information, so that as they're providing information to you all, they'll at least be aware of some of the interest areas that you all shared. For BES, it was pretty heavily weighted on these areas. And then the rest of the interest areas were pretty, spread across all of their other offer areas. But these three pretty consistently received the majority of the votes. In the water bureaus, I will show you on the next 2 slides. There were 6 program areas that all received at least 5 votes for prioritization. That included the Bureau support offer area, employee investment, planning, customer service, water quality and regulatory compliance, and treatment. I think there was only one other that was kind of close behind that had 4 votes, but and that was distribution mains. And other than that, I think everything else only had, there were only a couple others that had maybe single votes. Otherwise, all 6 of these received 5 votes each. So that is where the voting landed. In the past, how we have done this is we've tried to identify for each of the bureaus 3 to 5 program areas. In this case, but I guess we can open it up for discussion for you all. At least on the table right now, there's 3 that are clearly identified for BES, 6 that have been identified for water. There wasn't really any waiting for those 6. They were all evenly prioritized, all 6 of them. And unless there's discussion, that people could either put a motion on the table to accept the priorities as they were submitted. People could make a suggestion to discuss some of these and then identify some subset of priorities within these. Again, the goal is to try to focus the presentation and discussion time at upcoming meetings, particularly in February and March, as you dive deeper into understanding the budget documents themselves and hear from the bureaus about some of the details of the budgets and the program offers that you'll be reviewing in more detail, and the questions that you ask about their budget documents. So I'm open, I guess I'll just open the floor and see if there's any questions about the exercise itself, about the priorities that are on the table, or about next steps. Tom.
Yeah, I actually had a hard time prioritizing things, thinking about, well, what are the bureaus going to tell us about the budgets, which we just heard about. And so I'm kind of thinking that I think it's good to prioritize, and but I do want to be flexible. So as we actually see more information from the bureaus, it could affect at least how I view what are some of the priorities, and perhaps many of us. So for instance, the discussion we just had about the, what's it called, the AMI, advanced metering, I don't know if that's within these 6 items for the Water Bureau, but it's actually a double project. So it's BES and Water Bureau, but Water Bureau's in the lead seat on that. So is that, for instance, is that under one of these 6 categories? And if it doesn't have to be answered, but if it isn't under one of the categories, as we go forward and we see something that might strike our attention to say, hey, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe we should address that and have some kind of proposal that comes from us to City Council. So I guess just in general, I'm trying to say I want to remain flexible, but yet structured.
Yeah, any project that I think that that you want to dive deeper into, whether it falls under one of these program offer areas. Sometimes they will fall under several because you know, they some of the offer areas, some of the projects may touch under several of them. So I'm not sure specifically. Water Bureau staff may be able to address that. But regardless, we can ask questions and dive deeper into specific projects and address them in your budget letter and discussions with the Bureau. So you're not limited just because you're identifying priorities. It's just intended to try to hone the conversation and get us started, but it's not intended to be limiting in any way.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I was just gonna kind of chime in, Tom, like we are always able to change our priorities based on things that come up and sort of rearrange. And I think it looks like some of these sort of already in the works as far as we've requested information. So I think some of these might kind of change as we get more information. But so I think in the interest of time, now that we've kind of seen this and where we've landed, maybe next meeting we can talk a little bit more about it and then sort of maybe have sort of a strategy session on the board and see if we've gotten some answers back for some of the questions that we've asked previous. So
sure, and I can share the summary of this information back with you all. We'll be sharing more information just very quickly. I know we're at the end of the meeting, so just as far as next steps, you know, we will be, the priority for the next meeting will be talking about the draft budget letter. So we as staff will be working on a draft letter and getting that out to you as we've discussed based on other discussions and documents that you've already drafted. Some of the recommendations, again, if you have other ideas, please continue to send those to me. And we'll pull all of that in and get draft information to you prior to the next meeting, but plan to have kind of in-depth conversation and really be ready to make some decisions at the next meeting. This is a very preliminary high level letter. And so it won't be until the more detailed second letter that your detailed recommendations will be made. So this will be a very high level one. So we'll dive deeper in the upcoming meetings.
thank you for that, Amy.
Thank you.
So with that, unless there's anything sort of lingering or questions, I think we'll end the board meeting.
This is, before everybody hops off, this is Eliza, and I wanted to just let everybody know, I'll send a follow-up email for folks who aren't at the meeting, but in the attempts to fix a calendaring problem for someone, I think I sent you all a bunch of meeting invites for the pub. The meeting times haven't changed. It's just the wonders of Outlook. And I apologize.
Thanks, Eliza. Karen Williams.
Thanks, Kaliska. All I was going to say is that on the last slide, there was a call for a volunteer to help Amy put together a budget letter, and I would be happy to volunteer for that if unless someone else wants to.
Great, thank you, Karen. And actually, I did forget to mention that Kale also volunteered, but I welcome 2 volunteers. So I will get in touch with both of you following the meeting. And that volunteering can be something that we can do via email and, you know, so it doesn't necessarily need to be formal meetings. We can connect outside of the meeting. So I will touch base with both of you.
I have a question with the letter.
Yeah.
Real quick, I know that we are, you know, pretty much done here. But with the letter, are we, the reason why I sent a response is that I volunteer to write the letter, but if it's a letter that is in support of rate increases, that's not something that I would support. So I, with withdrawal from that. But should we determine what should be in that letter before we start drafting it, or do we draft it and see if everybody agrees?
So the first letter is very high level. So what we had talked about at the prior meetings is that it will be the focusing on the budget values, the work plan frames that are pulling from your annual report, and any kind of emerging themes that have may be pulling from existing letters and prior documents. So we're not making any sort of new recommendations or formal recommendations at this point. It's very high level. This is the framework that we're using to consider the document. We're not making recommendations. So any formal recommendations that you'll be making will be made in future meetings and in the future document.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I would I volunteer sometime to be a part of that, just to kind of get a better understanding of what's going to be on there in the process of it. So, yeah, thank you.
This is Eliza, and also you read at your very last meeting in December, you all agreed on some very high level value statements for financial assistance, which so that's kind of in your annual report actually has a lot of that sort of value statement stuff. So a lot of it you've actually kind of written and can pull it together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this is Karen Williams, and our illustrious chair, Kaliska, needed to leave the meeting. So I just need, I think I can, I don't know, usurp the co-chair to be able to adjourn our meeting and say good night, everyone. Thank you for your time, and we will see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.